Tyranny is rising in the White House, and a man has declared himself our king. So I would like to know, rather, the people would like to know what you, congressmen, and your fellow congressmen are going to do to rein in the megalomaniac in the White House.
I'm not going to give you my best foghorn leghorn response to that. But what I was, you can go ahead and sit down. Thank you. When you talk about tyranny, when you talk about presidential power, I remember having the same discussion with Republicans when Biden was elected. The funny thing is, you're sitting here and a lot of you would probably say those January 6s who are yelling just as loud as you, who are upset just like you, and not listening.
Hey, let's restore some order. Let's restore some order. Hey, let's restore some order.
So yelling at me is not going to get any answer, okay?
Hey,
like I said, we're not going to yell.
Point of order. Hey, let's get through this, Congressman. Hey.
Yeah. I've seen Game of Thrones too. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on, because if you're not going to listen, to the answer, we might as well not discuss it, right? Do you want to hear the answer? If you'd stop yelling, I will answer. Otherwise, we'll move on. If you would stop talking for a second, I will answer your question, okay? So if you listen to what we've projected, and this goes both parties, by the way. This is a bipartisan problem. REINS Act, the REINS Act, which reins in executive power for both parties, whoever's in party power, and I think it could be tweaked actually to be much better. I don't think executive privilege should be as strong as it is. I think we're out of balance right now. I think your direct representation, whether you like me or not, I'm the closest thing you have to a representative. Your senator's not going to be as representative as me, and the president's not going to be as representative as me when it comes to you, the people in this district. Likewise, I think state government needs to be more powerful than federal government. It used to be that federal funds only made up 1/3 of the money spent, and states was 2/3. It's more representative of your money and your money spent. That's better. Always push government down to the local level, because you'll get better representation. I don't want to see the president make all the decisions. I don't. I didn't want to see. Do you not want to hear that I just said? I answered it directly. I said I don't want to see any president be too powerful.
Americans are deeply divided over Trump's first month back in office. About half say that he has overstepped when it comes to using presidential power, and about the same feel that he has gone too far in cutting federal programs. Joining us now is CNN's Renee Marsh and Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Tia Mitchell. So I want to bring you in for some perspective and context here, Tia. The congressman and his staff seemed a little bit caught off guard by this backlash. Tell us more about his district and the people who live there and who were there at that meeting.
So Rich McCormick's district is a pretty red district. It voted for Trump by about 20% above how the district voted for Kamala Harris. However, last night's town hall was held in Roswell, which is a suburb of Atlanta. It's North Fulton County. It's one of those towns that has increasingly become more Democratic as more and younger families have moved to that part of the state. So I think that even though his district is pretty red, he went to an area that was bluer. He went to an area that is less, Trumpy overall. And I think that was reflected a little bit in the turnout for this particular town hall.
Interesting, important context there. Renee, to go to you. So a federal judge declined to stop a union request to halt Trump's mass firing, saying that he doesn't have the jurisdiction to review. Tell us about that.
Right. So labor unions asked this federal judge to pause the mass firing of these probationary employees that we've been seeing from agency to agency. But what the judge said is that there is a process here, and the labor unions actually have to follow that process, which is going to the labor board first before bringing this claim to the court. So he just felt that he didn't have jurisdiction. Doesn't mean that this is over. It just means that they missed a step in his eyes and needed to go through that process. But Pamela, I mean, that video really kind of highlights here the sort of cracks that we are starting to see, even if Roswell is a growing blue area here in Georgia. The fact of the matter is some 80% of the federal workforce is outside of Washington, D.C., and that includes red states like Georgia, where you have some 79,000 federal workers. So when you're talking about mass layoffs and firings, it's happening in these red districts, it's happening in these red states, and the question is going to become, how do these Republican lawmakers deal with angry people who are losing their jobs, and yet these Republican lawmakers are staying true to, or trying to stay true to, the president and his policies. It'll be interesting to see how they'll handle that, because it's not just the job cuts, but it's also the funding freezes.
All right, joining us now, we have NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona and staff writer for The Atlantic and MSNBC political analyst here with me on set, Ashley Parker. Ashley, I know that our bar for remarkable just keeps getting higher, but that was a pretty remarkable clash, and it could have serious repercussions for the state of Maine. How are governors, politicians having to navigate standing their ground, but also dealing with a president who can really impact their ability to do things in their jurisdiction?
Right. Well, in some way, what you're seeing is a partisan split, right? If you are a Democratic governor, Democratic senator, you are more willing to openly clash with the president. To me, what's more fascinating in certain ways is what you see on the Republican side, where a lot of these DOGE cuts, where the attitude is sort of break things and put the shards back together after the fact,
right,
maybe if necessary.
Which might work at a startup, but maybe not at the federal government.
And not even always at a startup. But again, for these Republicans, they're still unwilling to really challenge their president. They will sort of say, we agree with all the cuts, but we would just like some funding for NIH in Alabama, right? Or we agree with everything, but you must have made a mistake because this cut actually hurts our rural farmers. So they're sort of asking, they're still abdicating a lot of the powers that Congress has, such as the power of the purse, but they're kind of, at this point at least, politely asking for little cutouts.
All right, Melanie, I want to change topics just a little bit, but it's definitely related, and turn to a clash of a different sort, and that's with Republican Congressman Rich McCormick. He kind of faced off against this angry crowd of constituents yesterday. Let's take a quick listen.
I understand trying to do more with less. That's reasonable. What's not reasonable is taking this chainsaw approach. Why is this being jammed down the pipe so rushed and sloppily?
The people would like to know what you, Congressman, and your fellow congressmen are going to do to rein in the megalomaniac in the White House.
Millie, I just came back from overseas, and the question I kept getting from European leaders is, why aren't people angry about this? Why aren't people protesting? We're starting to see a little bit of that. Are other congressional Republicans facing similar backlash over these DOGE cuts?
Yeah, McCormick is actually not alone. There were a number of House Republicans who were confronted by angry constituents at town halls all across the country this week. That includes Cliff Benz. He is a congressman from Oregon. He represents a safe red seat, just like McCormick does. But he also represents a sizable share of the population that is on either Medicaid or food stamps. And he also represents a number of federal workers, because in Oregon, particularly in that region, there are a lot of federal workers. There's a lot of public land. There's a lot of the United States Forest Service. And those are the workers that were among the layoffs because of DOGE. And so as these cuts are starting to hit home, as the impacts are starting to be felt, and as these Republicans were back in their districts for the first time this week in a while, Republicans are really starting to feel the heat. But for them, it is quite a conundrum, because on the one hand, Obviously, they want to protect their constituents who are federal workers. Those are the people that elected them to Congress in the first place. But at the same time, they don't want to be seen as disloyal to President Donald Trump or to Elon Musk. So that is what we're seeing playing out in a lot of these town halls across the country right now.
And Ashley, speaking of Elon Musk, you've got a new piece in The Atlantic that kind of delves into these young Musk acolytes, the guys making these job cuts, essentially. Did you uncover any methodology behind how they're choosing these layoffs other than point, click, delete?
Well, what's interesting is, in some ways, certain things we wrote about would be a comedy of errors were it not for people's jobs and livelihoods being at stake, right? So, for instance, at the Department of Energy, they come in, the Department of Energy workers, they get an email saying the court has ruled this deferred buyout can go on.
So, folks, MAGA is turning on Trump and Trumpism here. They are. They 100% are. Because here's the thing. The first Trump term, yeah, he was a monster. But it's even worse this time. But what also was happening last time is he got to benefit from the economy of Barack Obama. And to Trump's credit early on, he didn't make a lot of major shocking economic changes. A lot of that came later in the term. Like he wanted to renegotiate trade deals with Mexico and Canada. But he did that later in the term. So for the most part, people still got the Barack Obama, Joe Biden, the Biden-Obama economy. And it was pretty good. And we were still in that historic period. And this was global. This is not really about Republican, Democrat. This was a global thing of low inflation. This time, everyone is furious because we're still in at least relative to the 2000s and 2010s, a period of high inflation, and Americans and the people around the world are not used to it. And Trump lied and said he was going to fix it day one, and he's only made it worse. And so whether it's the cuts that are actually hurting MAGA, remember, what MAGA really believes is that the cuts are meant to hurt the bad people. And by bad people, they mean African Americans, other minorities, people poorer than them, liberals, whatever their stereotype of a liberal is. That's who Trump was supposed to hurt. But because his cuts are so broad and so haphazard, MAGA is actually realizing that Trump doesn't give a damn about me either. And it's devastating for him.